She thought it would just be a wedding, but when the invitation arrived, her heart skipped a beat. Eva had been invited to something she was never meant to belong to. Subscribe and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? The elegant gold embossed card felt like a reminder of everything she had longed for, but could never reach. It was from Lila, her childhood friend, but their paths had long diverged. Eva hadn't seen Lila in years, but when Lila's mother sent the invitation, Eva couldn't resist the strange hope it sparked. She had always been the one left behind, not quite good enough for their world. But this invitation was a bridge to that world, or so Eva thought. The grand estate was everything Eva had imagined, and more. As she drove up to the gates, she was swallowed by the sheer magnitude of it. The sprawling marble mansion, towering columns, meticulously manicured lawns, and gardens bursting with color. The fountains shimmered in the late afternoon sun, sparkling like diamonds as they caught the light. It was a world she had never belonged to, and yet here she was, being drawn closer to it. Inside the car, Eva's fingers clenched around the invitation, her nerves growing with each passing moment. The car's engine hummed softly, as if whispering its own doubts into the silence. She hadn't felt like this in years, not since she was a child trying to fit into a world that didn't know her name. Now it was that same world, polished and perfect, that was waiting for her. She took a deep breath, willing herself to stay composed, willing herself to face whatever came next. When she finally stepped out of the car and onto the cobbled driveway, a valet sharply dressed and with a practiced smile opened the door for her. His smile faltered just slightly as he took in her modest lavender gown. Eva felt the brief sting, but she smiled back, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and stepped out into the estate. She had dressed carefully, enough to be respectful, enough to fit in without drawing too much attention. But inside, she was already wondering if she had made a mistake. The courtyard was alive with laughter and soft chatter, the kind that seemed so foreign to Eva. The guests, clad in their luxurious attire, were an image of effortless grace, their polished faces and perfect smiles glowing like something from a dream. Eva, on the other hand, felt out of place. She couldn't help but feel like a shadow walking through the scene, unnoticed and unwanted. She was just a guest, one that wasn't supposed to be there, not truly. She found herself standing at the edge of it all, her heart hammering in her chest. The invitation had promised her a place in Lila's world, but it didn't come with the understanding of what that world was really like. The laughter and chatter around her felt like a distant hum, like a soundtrack playing in the background of someone else's life. Eva realized with a sinking feeling that she had been wrong to think she could be a part of this. As she walked toward the grand entrance, she kept her eyes on the floor, avoiding the eyes of the other guests. They moved in groups, talking, laughing, comfortable in their skin. But Eva's skin felt foreign to her in this place. Her dress, though beautiful, seemed inadequate here. The makeup she had applied to mask her insecurities felt like a thin veil that everyone could see through. This wasn't her world. She wasn't supposed to be here. Inside, the grand hall almost took her breath away. The tall glass ceilings, the crystal chandeliers, the tables draped in fine linens, the delicate flowers cascading down the walls. It was a dream of perfection. Yet in the midst of it all, Eva felt like a ghost. Her reflection in the polished marble floors was the only thing that acknowledged her existence, but even that felt like an illusion. Lila was at the center of it all, radiant and untouchable. Surrounded by her true family, Eva caught a glimpse of her, laughing, effortlessly glowing in the light of her world. For a moment, she felt like an intruder. She didn't belong here, not now, not ever. The realization hit her like a cold wave. She was the charity case. She was the one who had been included out of obligation, never truly welcome. Lila's family had always kept their distance. Their kindness was wrapped in a layer of charity, but it was never real. Not the way it was between Lila and the others. Eva felt the sting of exclusion, sharp and unmistakable. She had always been the quiet one, the girl from the wrong side of town, the one who never quite fit in. She had spent years trying to earn a place in their world, trying to be what they wanted her to be. But tonight, as she walked through the ballroom, That effort seemed futile. No matter what she did, she would never be enough. They would never see her as they saw Lila. Lila's family had made it clear from the beginning. They had made her feel welcome, but only enough to maintain the illusion. They had given her a seat at their table, but never a true place at their side. And now, as Eva watched Lila and her friends bask in the glow of their world, she knew the truth. She wasn't part of this world. She never had been. And no matter how much she tried, she would never be more than a guest. She had come here hoping for something, hoping for a connection, for a place to call her own. But now, standing in the midst of it all, she realized that she had been foolish. She wasn't a part of their world. She was just a shadow, a bystander in a story that wasn't hers. Eva stepped away from the crowd, her feet carrying her to the edge of the room. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she knew she needed to escape the suffocating perfection around her. She wasn't ready to face Lila, not yet, and the thought of her family standing together in their perfect unity made her feel smaller than she ever had before. As she walked through the estate, her heart heavy with the weight of what she had come to realize, she couldn't help but wonder what had possessed her to come in the first place. The invitation had promised her something she would never have, an illusion of belonging, and now, standing in the middle of it all, she felt more alone than ever. This was a world built on appearances, on wealth, on status. And Eva was just a guest, an outsider who didn't fit into their perfect picture. There was no place for her here. Why did I think I could belong here? Eva wondered, feeling the weight of the question as it pressed down on her chest. The wedding, the guests, the laughter, it all felt too far out of reach. As she stepped into the grand hall, the opulence struck her. The space was vast, with soaring ceilings and chandeliers that cast their glittering light across the room. Guests dressed in lavish attire milled about, their voices rising in harmonious chatter. The women's gowns shimmered, each one more elaborate than the last, and the men moved through the crowd with an effortless grace. It was a world Eva had only glimpsed from afar, never truly allowed inside. Her lavender dress, modest and simple, seemed too small against the grandeur around her. Her hair, pinned into a simple style, was a far cry from the glamorous waves that framed the faces of the other women. Eva tried to remain composed, walking through the room with as much grace as she could muster, but every step felt like an intrusion. She felt their eyes on her, first the fleeting glances, then the prolonged stares. She wasn't imagining it. She could feel the judgment, subtle but sharp. She wasn't meant to be here. They could see it too, the way she looked out of place, the way her attire lacked the polish of the others. Eva's skin prickled with the uncomfortable awareness of being different. She glanced around, trying to find Lila, hoping for a moment of connection, a reminder that she wasn't completely invisible. But Lila was lost in the crowd, surrounded by people who were much more suited to this world. Lila's laughter rang out, bright and confident, as she exchanged pleasantries with her closest friends. Eva watched from the periphery, feeling the gap widen between them. She had been included in this world out of a false sense of charity and obligation to someone they once knew. Eva realized that now. The conversations she overheard were laced with ease, their subjects drifting between business, art, and the latest fashion trends. The way they spoke, the effortless way they laughed, it was as if they all belonged to the same world, a world that Eva would never be a part of. Eva felt the sting of exclusion more sharply than she ever had before. She was a spectator, not a participant. The others moved through the night, enjoying their drinks, making connections, sharing stories that seemed to belong to a different language entirely. Eva, on the other hand, felt like an outsider, unwanted and unnoticed. It wasn't the obvious kind of exclusion, the kind that screamed for attention. It was the quiet kind, the subtle exclusion that made her feel invisible, like a shadow in the corner of the room. The cold realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. No matter how much she tried, no matter how much she wanted to be part of this world, she would never truly belong. She was the girl from the wrong side of town, the one who had never quite fit in. Lila's family had kept their distance from the beginning, offering kindness wrapped in charity but never real acceptance. And now, as Eva stood among them, it became painfully clear that they had only ever given her a seat at their table out of obligation, never out of true connection. Lila's family had given her a place, yes, but it was a place that was always meant to be temporary, a place where she could watch, but never fully participate, a place where she would always be an outsider. Eva tried to push the feeling of exclusion down, to ignore the hollow ache inside her, but it was impossible. She had come here hoping for a sense of connection, a place to belong. She had imagined that this wedding, this event, would offer her a glimpse of something she had always wanted, acceptance. But as she stood there, surrounded by the laughter and conversation that felt like it belonged to a different world, she realized that it was all an illusion. She wasn't part of their world. She never had been, and she never would be. With a heavy heart, Eva made her way to the edge of the room, away from the laughter and the conversations. She needed to escape the suffocating perfection that surrounded her. She wasn't ready to face Lila. Not yet. She needed time to process, to accept the truth that had been staring her in the face all along. Her thoughts swirled as she walked, each step heavier than the last. What had possessed her to come here? The invitation had promised her a place, but it had been nothing more than an illusion. A carefully constructed image of belonging, one that was never meant for her. She had hoped for connection, for acceptance, but now she saw that she was always meant to be a guest. Nothing more. Just an outsider, standing on the edges, watching from afar. This world, built on wealth and status, had no place for someone like Eva. She wasn't meant to fit into the perfect picture they had created. The perfection she had once longed for only served to highlight her own inadequacies. The beauty of the estate, the laughter, the perfectly coiffed guests, it all felt distant and unattainable. Eva wasn't a part of it. She never had been. She paused for a moment, standing alone by the marble columns, her hand clenched tightly around the invitation. She wasn't sure why she had come or what she had hoped to find. All she knew now was that she was out of place, and the longer she stayed, the more she felt the weight of that truth. The invitation had promised her belonging, but all it had given her was the harsh reality of her own outsider status. The world she had always longed to be a part of wasn't hers to enter. As the night continued around her, Eva made the choice to walk away. She didn't need to stay. She had been looking for a connection that wasn't there. She had been searching for a place where she could finally belong, but now she knew that it wasn't going to happen. The wedding, the laughter, the smiles, they were all just reminders of a world she would never be part of. A world built on appearances, on wealth, and on status. And she would never be more than an outsider. The invitation had promised her more, but it had only shown her the painful truth. There was no place for her here. Maybe I didn't belong here after all, Eva thought, her heart heavy with the weight of the realization. But the moment that followed would change everything. The hours had passed, and Eva had found herself increasingly distanced from the celebration. She was no longer in the thick of it, no longer pretending to fit into a world that wasn't hers. The room around her, full of people laughing and chatting in perfect harmony, felt distant now. She had retreated into a quieter corner, away from the dazzling lights and the ever-present smiles. For the first time that evening, she was completely alone with her thoughts. As the sounds of the celebration faded into a soft hum in the background, a quiet voice broke through the noise. "Eva?" It was Lila. The voice was hesitant, almost startled. Eva turned her head, her chest tightening. Lila stood there, a bit out of place herself, looking as though she had just emerged from the glow of the spotlight to find someone who didn't belong. The radiant smile that Eva had seen all night was now softened with curiosity. Lila's eyes were wide, not with the usual superiority that Eva had come to expect, but with genuine surprise. Lila had seen her. For the first time, Lila noticed her. Not as a childhood friend she could hardly remember, not as an outsider simply invited to fill a seat, but as someone standing in front of her. Eva's breath hitched. It was a small thing, this moment, but it was enough. The recognition in Lila's eyes shattered something inside her. All the years of feeling invisible, of always being the one overlooked, the one excluded, vanished in that instant. Lila took a few hesitant steps toward her, and Eva stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. You look amazing, Ava. It's been so long. Lila's words were simple, but they held a warmth Eva hadn't expected. They felt genuine, not rehearsed. It was an opening, a bridge between the old version of them, the girls who had been friends before life had taken them down different paths, and the women they had become in the years apart. Eva, despite herself, couldn't stop the small smile that tugged at her lips. "It's good to see you, Lila," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper in the noise of the room. Lila seemed to study her for a moment, as though searching for something, before speaking again. "I'm sorry, Ava. I know it's been hard. You've probably felt like an outsider all this time, haven't you?" Lila's voice was kind, but there was an edge to it, a realization that came too late. Eva's throat tightened, and for a moment she almost wished Lila hadn't spoken those words. The vulnerability in Lila's tone, the rare hint of remorse, was both a balm and a wound. Lila had never seen her like this before, had never understood how much it hurt to constantly be on the outside looking in. But now, standing here, Lila was finally acknowledging the truth. The gap between them had always been wider than Eva had ever been willing to admit. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "It's okay," she replied, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "I've been used to it for a long time." The words felt raw as they left her mouth. It wasn't just about tonight, about the wedding. It was about years of trying to belong to a world that would never welcome her as one of their own. But in this small moment, in this quiet exchange between two people who had once been close, something shifted. Lila wasn't apologizing. She didn't need to. She was offering something more valuable than an apology: acknowledgement. Lila had finally seen her. Eva wasn't invisible anymore. The moment stretched out, fragile and delicate, as they stood there, the noise of the celebration fading into the background. Eva realized then that she didn't need their approval. She didn't need to force her way into their world. The world had always been too small for her, too confined by its own expectations and limitations. The truth was, she had never really belonged in a world that only valued appearances, that defined worth by status and wealth. Lila, for the first time, had seen the woman standing before her, not just a shadow, not just a guest at the wedding, but a person who had lived her own life, made her own choices, and fought her own battles. Lila's recognition, her acknowledgement, was enough to make Ava realize that she didn't need their world. She didn't need their validation. Ava's heart, heavy and uncertain just moments ago, lightened. She stood straighter, feeling a sense of quiet pride settle inside her chest. She didn't need to belong to this world. She didn't need to force herself into a mold she was never meant to fit. "Thank you, Lila," she said, her voice steady now, the tremor gone. It wasn't just for the words Lila had spoken, but for the moment of clarity they had given her. Lila might never truly understand the depth of what she had said, but Ava did. The moment passed as quickly as it had come, and soon Lila was moving away, back to her guests, her friends, her world. Eva watched her for a moment, but this time, she didn't feel the ache of longing. She didn't feel the sharp sting of exclusion. She had been seen, not just by Lila, but by herself. For the first time, she understood something profound. She didn't need to be a part of this world to be whole. She was enough, just as she was. As she stood there in the quiet corner of the room, Eva realized that her story was hers to write, not theirs to define. It wasn't about trying to prove anything, trying to fit in, or trying to earn a place. It was about choosing to see herself, to claim her own worth, and to step into the world she was meant to inhabit. And in that moment, Ava knew her journey was just beginning. It wasn't about the wedding, or the guests, or the family who had never truly understood her. It was about her, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Sometimes the truth is too heavy to bear, but once it's out, it can never be forgotten. Ava stood still in the hallway, the noise of the party humming faintly in the background. She wasn't sure how much longer she could stand to watch it all, the laughter, the music, the perfection that had never been meant for her. She had always felt out of place in their world, but tonight it was more apparent than ever. The harsh light of reality had cut through the illusion she had been trying so hard to fit into. She wasn't meant to be here. For years she had accepted their charity. She had accepted their invitations, their false kindness, all in the hope of one day being truly accepted. But as she stood there, she realized something that had been slowly building inside her all night. This was never about her belonging. It was about their need to maintain an illusion. The seat at the table had never been meant for her. It was a placeholder, a way for them to look good, to show they were inclusive without actually being inclusive. She had never been part of their world, and she would never be more than a guest. They didn't see her. They saw what they wanted her to be. And for all these years, she had played along, trying to mold herself into the version of her they could accept. But tonight, something had changed. She couldn't pretend anymore. She had come to the wedding hoping for a connection, hoping for something real, but instead she found herself staring at a mirror that showed her nothing but the empty space she had tried to fill for so long. Eva's thoughts were interrupted when she caught a glimpse of Lila, her childhood friend, standing near the grand staircase. Lila was laughing with her friends, glowing under the lights, effortlessly part of the world she had always wanted to belong to. And for a moment, as Eva watched her, it hit her. Lila had never been the one to offer real connection. It had always been a performance, something to keep up appearances. But Eva had been too blind to see it. There was nothing wrong with Lila. There was nothing wrong with the world she had created, but there was everything wrong with Eva's desire to fit into it. She had been chasing after something that wasn't meant for her, something that would never make her whole. This wasn't the life she was supposed to live. She was chasing shadows. Eva turned away from the scene in front of her feet moving slowly as if carrying the weight of everything she had just realized. She passed through the ornate hallways, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. The grandeur of the estate felt suffocating now. The polished marble floors and towering walls no longer a symbol of success, but a cage. She had spent so much of her life thinking this was the world she needed to be part of, but now she couldn't shake the feeling that it was all hollow. It wasn't about Lila or the wedding. It wasn't even about the people who had never truly seen her. It was about the story she had been telling herself, the story of trying to belong, the story of waiting for someone else to tell her she was worthy. But that story was over now. She had been given an invitation to their world, but she didn't need their acceptance to be who she was. For the first time, she understood. She didn't need to belong here to be enough. As she walked, her thoughts became clearer. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about everything. The constant feeling of being too much or not enough, of always adjusting herself for the comfort of others. It had been exhausting, trying to fit a mold that was never meant for her. She had been chasing validation, chasing the approval of people who could never truly see her, and in doing so, she had lost sight of herself. Eva paused near a window, her reflection staring back at her. For a moment, she didn't recognize the woman in the glass. She wasn't the person she had been when she first arrived. She wasn't the one who had walked in here hoping for something that could never be given. She wasn't the girl who had spent years feeling invisible. The truth settled over her, heavy and cold. She had been invisible to them, but she had been invisible to herself as well. She had lived so much of her life trying to fit into a world that didn't understand her, and in doing so, she had stopped seeing her own worth. But no more. The truth was out now, and it had nothing to do with Lila or the people in the ballroom. It had everything to do with her. She had allowed herself to be defined by their expectations for too long. She had been chasing approval when she should have been chasing her own path, her own truth. The world they had created, the world of perfection and appearances, was nothing more than a facade, and she didn't need to be part of it anymore. Eva felt a shift inside her, something she had been waiting for without realizing it. The ache in her chest, the one that had been there for so long, started to fade. She had spent years hoping for something that could never be hers. But now she knew. She was enough just as she was. She didn't need their world. She didn't need their approval. She didn't need to be seen by them to be seen by herself. She turned from the window, her heart lighter, her mind clearer. It wasn't just the revelation that had changed her. It was the moment she had chosen to stop living for someone else's story. She didn't need to fit in. She didn't need to belong. She was enough, just as she was. The night was far from over, but it no longer mattered. Eva had found the truth, and it had set her free. The illusion had crumbled. and in its place there was only her. The woman who didn't need anyone's validation to be worthy. The woman who was ready to step into the world on her own terms. And as she walked away from the grandeur of the estate, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The truth had found her, and now she was ready to find herself. This was her moment. This was her time. The future was hers to create. You can't wait for someone else to give you the life you deserve. Ava stepped out of the estate, the air cool against her skin as the night began to settle in. The hum of the celebration behind her seemed so far away now, almost as if it belonged to another world. The soft light from the street lamps illuminated the path in front of her, casting long shadows across the driveway. But none of it felt intimidating anymore. She had come here hoping for something, hoping to belong. But now, standing at the edge of this perfect world, she realized something much deeper than what she had expected. The life she had been chasing, the approval she had craved, wasn't the life she needed. It wasn't the life that would ever make her feel whole. There had been a time when she thought if she just tried hard enough, if she fit in perfectly enough, they would finally see her. They would finally welcome her into the life she thought she was meant to lead. But now she saw it all for what it really was, a fantasy built on expectations that weren't hers to meet. She had been a guest in their world, a placeholder, never truly part of it. They had given her just enough space to make her feel like she belonged, but it had always been an illusion. The realization that she had spent so much of her life yearning for something that wasn't even meant for her hit her harder than she expected. And yet, as the truth began to settle in her bones, she felt a quiet strength rising inside her. The world she had imagined she was meant to be part of wasn't the world that mattered anymore. The path they had set out for her, the one that demanded she fit into their mold, was no longer the one she was willing to walk. She had been trapped by the idea that their approval was what would make her life worthwhile. But now she saw the truth. Her worth didn't depend on them. It never had. For the first time in a long while, Eva felt the weight of that realization lift. She didn't need their validation. She didn't need them to see her. She didn't need any of it. The invitation to the wedding had promised a connection, a place in a world that had always felt foreign. But standing outside the estate now, she understood that her connection had always been with herself. She had always been enough. It wasn't the approval of others she needed to seek. It was her own approval. The car, a modest sedan, sat waiting for her by the valet station. The young man who had opened the door for her earlier looked at her with a tired expression, clearly unaware of the transformation that had taken place in Eva in the few short hours she had spent within those walls. The car felt like a lifeline, something solid in the face of the chaos she had just left behind. As she slid into the driver's seat, the world of the wedding and all the people who had made her feel less than faded into the distance. She didn't need them, not anymore. The engine purred to life, the headlights cutting through the darkness as Eva pulled away from the estate. The road stretched out ahead of her, winding through the hills, leading her further away from the world that had never truly accepted her. She wasn't running away, she was moving forward. The future was hers to define, and she wasn't going to let anyone dictate what it should look like. The stars above twinkled with a quiet promise, and for the first time, Eva felt the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. She wasn't bound by anyone's expectations, not by Lila's, not by her parents, not by anyone. The life she had spent so long trying to fit into no longer mattered. What mattered now was choosing her own path. The freedom to choose, to define her own worth, was in her hands. It always had been. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the peace of knowing that she wasn't beholden to anyone. She wasn't waiting for someone else to tell her she was enough. She was enough just as she was, and that truth had changed everything. She glanced at the empty passenger seat beside her. There was no one there to give her permission to be free, no one to validate her choices. The freedom she had longed for had been inside her all along. She didn't need anyone's approval to take the first step toward the life she wanted. She had everything she needed within herself, and now she was ready to embrace it fully. Eva's thoughts drifted to the future, to what lay ahead. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know where this road would lead, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of the unknown. She had spent so much time fearing what was outside her control, but now she understood something vital. The only thing she could control was her own choices, And she had made the most important one of all. She was choosing herself. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. The invitation to Lila's wedding had been a reminder of everything she had longed for, but never truly had. And now, standing at the threshold of something new, she could finally let go of that longing. It wasn't about the approval of others anymore. It was about the power to create her own story. The world was vast, and her future was waiting for her. No longer bound by the constraints of what others expected, she was free to step into the world on her own terms. There was no more need to pretend, no more need to shrink herself to fit someone else's narrative. As she drove, Eva thought about what it meant to truly be free. It wasn't the absence of challenges or the absence of obstacles. It was the ability to face them on her own terms, with the strength that came from knowing who she was. She didn't need to seek approval from others because she had already found the approval she needed within herself. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat, and she glanced down, seeing the familiar name of Lila's mother flashing across the screen. Eva didn't hesitate. With one simple swipe, she silenced the call. She had nothing more to prove. She didn't need to explain herself. She didn't need their validation anymore. She had already given herself the one thing she had always needed, the freedom to choose. As the miles passed, Eva's heart grew lighter, her mind clearer. She had walked away from the world that had never truly seen her, and now she was free to create the life she deserved. A life that didn't require approval, a life that was built on her own terms. She wasn't looking back. There was nothing behind her now but a shadow, and ahead of her was everything she had ever wanted. Freedom, peace, and the ability to choose her own future. And for the first time in her life, she was truly ready to embrace it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Feel free to share this video with others and check out more stories on our channel.